Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of this country that you're in. I am Sheila Gunn Reid. I'm the host of our daily news and opinion show, Rebel Roundup, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Tamara Ugolini, and we both seem ill-prepared on this Monday.
It's a manic Monday, as per
Lord.
usual, isn't it? And with so much happening on the social political landscape and our snap election, what I guess we're about almost halfway through till election day. And so things have just been kind of all over the place for us for the last few weeks.
And news is breaking like crazy. Even this morning, we'll talk about it. The SITE task force, that's the elections and security officials, joint task force on elections integrity, have just held a press conference this morning about foreign interference, guess by whom, in this election. And you'll never guess who they are acting in favor of. We'll get to that in a second. Tamara, why don't you tell everybody what we're doing here while I try to pull up the list of topics that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We're streaming on Rumble and YouTube, and we have just been remonetized. Well, I shouldn't say just. We've been remonetized for about a month or two now on YouTube after speaking truth and contrarily, if that's a word, to the COVID narrative, which had us demonetized about 4 or 5 years ago. So if you're joining us on YouTube, which a lot of you still are, you can give us what's called a super chat, and it's a great way for you to get involved in the stream directly, and we will feature your comment live on air. I think it's a $5 or more donation, and then anything less than that we will try to get to, but usually these live streams are so jam-packed that we just kind of wait to see if we can get to everybody's. And then on Rumble, you can give us a Rumble rant. So there's a few different ways. If you want to support us, you can do that. I think also if you're tuning in after we have ended the live stream, you can give us a super thanks on YouTube. And so all of that is very much appreciated. Help fund our journalism because we are independent from the government. Unlike the mainstream media, we don't take any government handouts or subsidies. And so we rely on the generosity of our donors and our supporters to keep us afloat. And the live stream is a fun way for us to just be off the cuff and speak about the latest news and breaking things, as Sheila already mentioned. And so right off the hop, we Canadians are in a snap election. We hit the polls on April 28th, and the two main contenders are leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, and then Liberal leader Mark Carney, who was really inserted by a few Liberal faithful rather than ever being elected by a constituency. He doesn't hold a seat in the House of Commons and has otherwise never campaigned before. So this is a first for Mark Carney, as he kind of tries to distance himself from his previous high-ranking bank positions and now aligns himself as some sort of political, what does he call himself, an outsider, even though he's been like the most insider for the last few decades. So first and foremost, I guess we'll start off with some clips of Pierre Poilievre slamming what he calls the radical liberals for trying to erase Canada's rich history. And this is in regards to the redesign of the Canadian passport under the Justin Trudeau Liberals.
Yeah.
Before we get to this clip, actually, do we have any visuals to share with the audience about just how radical the new passport design is? It's just like basically Justin Trudeau's childhood seen through abstract visuals. And Sheila, I know we A-tipped it, but I don't remember off the top of my head. How much did Canadians pay for this?
$161 million.
Yeah.
And I did a story on it not all that long ago. It was 161 million, and then I got hands on the back and forth between these liberals and
Mhm.
I guess other liberal bureaucrats about like, oh, we need to change this because there's not enough. You look at the rainbow on it, like there's
Of
not
course.
enough. There wasn't enough like representation back and forth, and anyways, money well spent. Remember that when you are remitting your tax bill at the end of this month. Uh, just all the new and creative ways the liberals have been wasting your money.
Well, and Canadians were outraged, and I think rightfully
Yeah.
so. This new passport design is just, it's laughable. There's no rich history. It did away with any sort of nod to veterans, Canada's, anything to do with Canadian identity. It's all been
Terry
replaced by
Fox,
Terry Fox, a national icon.
which which the liberals tell me is some kind of sacred symbol, right? Like, don't put a freedom flag or even a Canadian flag on Terry Fox because he's a sacred Canadian symbol, and yet they took him off the passport.
The craziest part of all of this is just as we were coming out of the COVID handling, this was the priority of the government, was
You couldn't
to
even get a
redesign
passport, by the
our
way.
passports. Yeah, we couldn't even get passports or renew them or have anything to do with Service Canada. It was a complete SHIT show on the federal level, and yet we could have a completely revamped $161 million passport design. I was so mad. I got a new passport right
Yeah.
before they redesigned it, and then I lost it. I actually ended
Oh
up finding
no.
it later. I just misplaced it. But I got a new. I had to get a new one because I couldn't find my other one, and it's this new. Oh, it makes me so mad. Anyway,
I renewed mine for 10 years, not all that long ago.
same. Yeah,
And
and then I lost it.
my 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 passport photo, I was in a rush because I had to travel for work, and my passport photo looks like I am an absolute deranged lunatic. I wouldn't let me on a flight with that passport photo, but I'm going to hold on to it with my cold dead hands before I renew and get one of these woke passports.
Well, and if Pierre Poilievre has anything to do with it, we will be getting our old ones back, or at least some semblance of them. So let's sort of this quick clip of him condemning the Liberals for this crucial endeavor.
The reason why the radical liberals want us to forget our history is because you cannot control your future unless you know your past. We know that you need to understand history. We need to inculcate the great lessons that are passed down to us. This country of ours, these blessings we enjoy, it didn't just fall out of the sky. It didn't happen out of overnight. It's based on 800 years of tradition that goes back to the fields of Runnymede in England. That's where we got our system of freedom under the law, of parliamentary democracy from. It took hard work from a lot of people who are not here anymore. It's one thing to criticize the decisions made in the past. It's also one thing to say that we've never been a perfect country. But we should be grateful for this country, and we should honor its proud history and the people who made it possible. And so we're going to put the famous five, Terry Fox, our soldiers, and all of our other heroes back in the passport.
Yeah. Yeah, there you have it.
Yeah.
I think that's a step in the right direction. Although I just, as somebody who is very keen on fiscal responsibility, I hate the thought that we are going to be spending more money now just to bring it back to an
Yes.
actual credible looking passport, right? It just looks like an a make work project, this new one. So that's the only part that really kind of irks me.
Right. But I think the fiscal irresponsibility hangs squarely around the neck of the liberals. I mean,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
willing to spend a little bit of money to preserve our heritage and make sure it's not Orwellian or like erased in an Orwellian memory hole, the way the liberals want to do with everything that's uncomfortable, including John A. Macdonald. Speaking about uncomfortable history, Mark Carney was asked about his father's view that residential school founders had good intentions because if it were left up to the liberals and their NDP enablers, Mark Carney's own dad would be in the slammer for residential school denialism because he took a nuanced view of the residential school system. That yes, it was bad, but also not entirely bad. So go ahead.
Before we highlight that too, Drea had a great piece. I think this came out, wow, that's great. The end of March. So that was just, I was going to say last week. So a little bit more than last week. Time is flying. But Mark Carney's dad, and I
Yes.
just shared it here. If we can pull up the report that she did, he ran an Indian day school.
Yes.
And so he has been silent with Indigenous media ever since. And Drea has a great piece. I urge anybody who's interested in the story to go and give it a read through. But he was an Indian day school administrator. And he documented both the good and the bad that he witnessed in the residential school system, which doesn't exactly fit. There's a photo of his dad there. It doesn't actually fit the politically correct narratives that we see about truth and reconciliation, and that it was all things bad at residential schools. And so he's really been mum on this topic ever since. But I think now we have the mainstream media trying to do somewhat of their job.
And I
we
think
have him.
Sorry, I'll finish my thought after we show him. Sorry.
Let's just play the clip of Carney responding to a mainstream media question about his father's role in residential schools.
There are several articles out about your father, specifically about how he was a principal at a federal Indian day school and went on to defend residential schools. Do you share his views that residential school founders were not ill-intended and that Indigenous-led studies highlighting these negative effects of these institutions were, quote, slanted?
I love my father, but I don't share those views, to be absolutely clear. It's a long, painful part of our history. I've learned personally, we've learned as a nation. We're in a process of the damage, of the fundamental damage of residential schools and day schools to those who attended them, those who were their descendants, if I can put it that way, the culture as well, and a very necessary, essential process of reconciliation, truth and reconciliation has begun. At the core of my government, as it was the case at the core of the previous government, will be to advance that process of reconciliation. That's a fundamentally and deeply held personal commitment of mine. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would have asked a different question. I probably would have sent our journalists armed with a stronger question than, do you agree with your dad? I would have said, do you agree with members of your party and your MPs that your dad's speech should be criminalized? Because that's really what it comes down to. He can easily say, well, I don't agree with my dad. Trust me, I don't agree with my family on a lot of things. But so it's easy to say, like, I just share a different viewpoint. But I think it should come down to, do you think his viewpoint should be outlawed and criminalized? Because that is the state of discussion here in Canada. And also I would have asked, what do you think you know about Indian residential day schools that your dad didn't know? And it's a bit much to hear this, the Liberals going after Aaron Gunn, a Conservative candidate in British Columbia, for his past comments on residential schools when Mark Carney's dad was quite literally an administrator of one. So it was, and you could also ask Mark Carney, if you think the residential school system was an evil system, do you believe that your dad was an evil man as part of a cog in an evil system?
Right.
Because if he, sorry to interrupt again, but if you think it was an evil thing, then you would have to admit that your dad was just an evil part of an evil thing. So do you think your dad's evil? Or were there good people working within the system? Because you can't really have it both ways. You can criminalize speech that says that there's a nuanced viewpoint and not all was bad, not all was good. Or you can say it was all bad. But if you say it was all bad, then you have to say that your dad was bad too. So dealer's choice, I guess.
Yeah, where do you stand, Mark Carney? But I don't know if we will not get a
No.
factual or accurate answer or response from him. But even as I don't remember what the NDP's name was out of BC, she is the one putting forth and pushing this
Yeah.
legislation to criminalize what they're calling residential school denialism. So basically, if you say anything against the prevailing narrative that residential schools were these horrible institutionalized beating places. I don't have a better word for that right now. But Drea also, this is Drea's beat. She did a whole documentary on the claim that there was 251 mass graves at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And then just yesterday, she featured an anonymous whistleblower who's part of the Kamloops. He is a Kamloops band member, and I say he, but I'm not even sure if it was a man or a woman, and we had to change up the voice and obviously hide the identity completely. But blew the whistle there that actually it was a great time, and learned English, got to get away from some of the woes of, an alcoholic family and other sort of toxic happenings in the home. So anybody who is interested in hearing the other side of this story, Drea's been doing some great work on it, and I highly recommend you read her article here about Carney's dad. There's a lot of hyperlinks to follow as well to kind of go on your own path, and then listen to the interview that she did with the current Kamloops band member who went to that residential school that claims to have had 251 mass graves that, again, have not been unearthed. And when Carney's committing, he'll continue to commit to truth and reconciliation. Is that just throwing more money at it and
Yes.
hoping that it eventually goes away? I mean,
Yep.
what kind of actual work are you going to do there, Mark Carney?
Right. And I should note, although I don't think it has anything to do with the quality of her journalism, but Drea herself is Indigenous, so she's committed to finding the truth, and as they keep saying, it's truth and reconciliation, but there's no reconciliation unless we deal with the truths, and there is more to the story. Like, you just can't write off everything as bad or as good. I think, as with everything, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I guess, unless you're Mark Carney and you take a viewpoint that everything was bad, and then he has to somehow attack the legacy of his own father as a bad man. I mean, I guess if that's what you want to do, Mark, I guess have at her.
Mm-hmm. As we see, it reminds me of kind of what we're seeing with the Safe Supply and
Yeah.
these outreach, these homeless shelters and all of these outreach shelters. It really depends on the administrator who is running the program, because of course there are going to be captured bad actors who are trying to capitalize on the taxpayer money and get in there and get their fair share of the trough, who aren't doing so in good faith. And of course, residential schools are not outside of that realm of what occurred, that reality. And so depending on the administrators and who is in charge of them, I'm not denying that there were instances where horrific things took place in some of these schools, but there were other instances where that was not the case at all. And none perhaps had knowledge of the other. And so I think what you say there, Sheila, is very accurate. And, saying, even coming clean and just saying, hey, there was never 215 mass graves. We haven't unearthed anything. Nothing's been proven. The ground penetrating radar is very superficial. It has a lot of issues. And we need to really recognize that we misled the public when we made that claim and walk it back. But none of that's happened. And instead, they're trying to criminalize anybody who says anything to the contrary. So, the whole idea of truth and reconciliation cannot occur without having those clear instances of truth and honesty being reported to the public. And just by throwing money at things, nothing's going to get any better.
No, I would like to know exactly what we're reconciling for. Because if we do need to reconcile for something, and I'm sure we do, I would sure like to know exactly what that is. Speaking of reconciling, Mark Carney has absolutely no intention of reconciling with Alberta. He claims he's an Alberta boy. He says he grew up here playing pond hockey or something on the mean streets of Edmonton. But he has singled out our premier for disdain, and he shouldn't, because he should have followed her path in trying to make inroads with the Trump administration instead of just running his mouth and then finding out the hard way that that's how you get 25% tariffs on your stuff, whereas we have escaped with 10% on oil and gas here. Let's listen to what he has to say.
We are fighting the Americans. We are fighting the Americans everywhere they understand. We're fighting the Americans in the pocketbook. We have retaliatory tariffs on them. We just hit them again in the auto sector. We're fighting them on Fox News, which is what they understand.
No, you're not.
We're sending Doug Ford onto Fox News
what they understand.
to show them that we're not messing
Doug Ford's
around
not
up here.
anybody.
And we're going to send Danielle next. Maybe we won't send her. Maybe we'll send Danielle. No, maybe we won't. We won't send Danielle. We're going to keep her. No, keep her. No, it's a bad idea. Forget. Strike that. Strike that. Just ignore that back there.
Wow. The internet is forever, Mark Carney.
Yeah. You know what? If I were a feminist, and the Liberals keep telling me they are, they should be applauding Danielle Smith's advocacy for her province and being the only successful advocate for any sector of the Canadian economy when going up against the Trump tariffs. Instead, they're attacking her, saying, "Oh, we're going to send Doug Ford on Fox News because that's the only thing they understand." Okay, so now you're attacking Fox News, and you are saying that Americans, they couldn't possibly understand anything from anybody else. However, it's nice to see that they are actually deciding that it is kind of smart to go on Fox News because that's the outlet that the Trump administration listens to, or at least watches. But we're not going to, no, let's strike that. That's a bad idea. Why? We only got 10% tariffs. And she continues to go down there and make the case. So maybe if you guys had done that to start with, but I mean, attacking Danielle Smith for what? Doing something and achieving something, and then making her the butt of a joke. The feminists and the Liberals, I mean, if that had been somebody saying that about Chrystia Freeland, of course, there would be like oh my God, look at him, he hates women. Mark Carney might, I don't know, but he sure indicates that he hates Alberta. And as an Albertan, I watched that with a real understanding of what's going to come our way if Mark Carney gets elected, because he's actually more open and upfront about his dislike for Danielle Smith than Trudeau ever was.
Well, and the divide is very clear that Mark Carney is not going to be taking any action or doing anything to unite the country, because if that's the way that he talks about Premier Smith, then that is just a key indication that Mark Carney is going to further segregate and divide this country. As he, makes these ridiculous social media posts like, we need a strong state broadcaster. I will pour more money into the CBC because they're a unifying force of our national identity, or, something along those lines he posts about. And then he goes and he slams a premier who has been really leading the charge in trying to negotiate and work out a fair deal with the Trump administration on the tariff issue. And this is clearly an indication of where Mark Carney will take the country if he's elected. It'll be more division, more ridiculous rhetoric, and fighting for his own personal interests instead of the interests of all Canadians, not just the Liberal few and the ivory tower dwellers.
Yeah, I mean, even the language that he's using, we're going to fight the Americans. We're going to fight the Americans here. And we're going to take the fight. How about we're going to work with the Americans to get this stuff fixed? Like, that should be where we're at. We're going to work with the Americans to repair the damage that we've done to the greatest trading alliance that has ever existed in the history of humankind. Like, that's what the Liberals have successfully done. They have undone the single largest strategic trading and cultural partnership in the history of humanity. That's what the Trudeau Liberals with Carney whispering in their ears. That's what they've done. And no one's talking about fixing it. We're going to work with the Americans. No, it's all elbows up. We're going to fight with them. The only
Yeah.
people who pay at the end of the day are Canadians.
And Americans. I mean, truth be
Yeah, of
told,
course.
it will be the middle class on both sides. But fighting the Americans, we're bringing a knife to a gunfight. We don't have any ammunition to fight the Americans with. They have the leverage. I mean, we have the oil and gas, but we don't have the refineries to refine that oil and gas. It again is this mutual partnership that we have with our closest neighbor and ally. And we don't have military capacity. We don't have the GDP to match theirs. I mean, if we're fighting the Americans, what in the heck are we fighting them with? Because really, they outpower us in every single instance.
Yeah, I mean, and it's sometimes it just shows like a strong misunderstanding of the oil and gas sector. Like our customers already have their own refineries. They don't want to buy a refined product. A refined product is actually a lot more dangerous to transport. Like it's nonsensical. And also think about Mark Carney has the no more pipelines law, the no more tankers law, the gender-based analysis plus shoehorned into approvals projects. So even if we wanted to do more refining at home, no foreign investor is going to look at Canada and say,
No.
with that regulatory regime, no thanks, we're building in West Texas. Or we're going to build in North Dakota, which shares an oil field with Saskatchewan. But you'll see there's a lot more activity happening in North Dakota than there is in Saskatchewan. And you can thank the Liberals for that, not Scott Moe, because you got to deal with these federal regulatory processes. We've got a chat we need to get to also, and an ad read. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to throw
Yeah,
to
please.
Doug Ford quickly because he references that let's send Ford on Fox News as though and I have to laugh because it's almost as though, Doug Ford is the guy that's taking on the fight, and the Premier of Ontario couldn't be any weaker. I mean, he's known as Flip Flop Ford because he never knows whether he's coming or going.
Yeah.
And now he's made this ridiculous announcement, in my opinion, and I'll say why here in a minute, to help workers and businesses weather the storm and keep people on the job. We're providing $11 billion in urgent relief and support. And this is so, to protect the auto industry and the workers, and all of that stuff is terrible. And don't get me wrong, there are people who are really terrified of where their next paycheck's going to come from. But this all could have been avoided. And you have Ford hitting back with this aggressive language, like we're going to cut off electricity to middle class Americans and we'll make them suffer. When he could literally just say, let's go to the table. Let's talk about these tariffs. Let's negotiate a better deal. He was on what was it? CHTV, I think it was last week. Really great clip there. I think it was about 11 minutes, where Ford is really pushed back on. And he makes it very clear that he has not tried to negotiate. He hasn't tried to bring in the pre-existing tariffs and taking those down a notch or removing those, because I think if he did do that, if he took off the tariffs that already existed or agreed to negotiate them, then we would have some wiggle room with President Trump on these other tariffs and this escalation. Ford can easily de-escalate this tension. And he has opted instead to just sit on his hands and say, well, I'm going to wait until President Trump. Remember, he was waiting until President Trump called him to talk about it because he didn't want to initiate that first call because we're playing like high school drama.
Yeah.
Oh, we went on
Playing
our first
hard
date
to get.
and yeah, is he going to call me? I don't know. I can't call him first.
Yeah.
This is just, and these are people's lives and livelihoods hanging in the midst. And instead of dealing with this in a fiscally responsible way, because Doug Ford is a progressive conservative only in name. Well, he's progressive conservative. He's only conservative in name. He is not fiscally responsible. And this is just reminiscent of the COVID era handouts that are going to contribute to even more inflation and even higher taxation. So I don't know where people and regular Ontarians think this is going to go, but I don't see this as being any sort of economic strong point.
No, it doesn't make any sense. Like we are 90 days into the Trump administration. It's not like Trump didn't campaign on this. They knew he won the election back in November. They had 2 months after that to get their ducks in a row to try to figure out like, hey, what is it that the administration wants from us, even though they've been telling you since, I don't know, the entire campaign. We're 90 days after Trump being sworn in, and the best these people have come up with is we're going to give you money if you end up unemployed. How about try to save the jobs? Like, did anybody even consider that? Like, instead of just running their mouths and accelerating the temperature with the Trump administration. So just dial it down a little bit, guys, because as you say, this is people's livelihoods. These are families. Every single one of those jobs is a family. And I wish they sort of thought about it that way instead of just swinging their wieners around like Mark Carney. We're going to fight the Americans. Or are you really going to fight the Americans? Really?
With
Because
what?
the tariffs. With what, by the way? You haven't even won an election yet. Now, before I was going to move on to the chats and the ad read, but I'll leave that while we're on this topic because Danielle Smith actually takes phone calls from the people. By the way, she has like it's called Your Province, and I think it's weekly, and you can call in and talk to the premier, and somebody texted in to ask her like please explain the tariffs, and this is a great way of explaining it. And I wish and this is what she explained to the Americans, which is why the Republican base is sort of shifting away from tariffs and sort of moving back towards free trade. So let's hear from our premier.
Dawn has texted in on the chat line, said, can you explain who takes the tariff? For example, U.S. tariff to Canada, Canada tariff to the U.S. Does the vendor get their asking price?
So what happens, and I can just tell you from what I'm working on with JBS right now, because they're a big a producer in my riding, obviously, major abattoir, but they also have cross-border cattle movements, cross-border packaged beef movements. So they got hit both ways. So when they were sending shipments down to the U.S. during those 3 days the tariffs were on, there's a customs broker there who keeps track of everything that they do, and then they send them a bill and say, you have to pay this within 6 days. And those dollars go to the U.S. government. Coming back the other way, they've ordered equipment and supplies so that they can develop a patty plant so that they can supply Wendy's with all of their hamburger patties. Those shipments are now coming across the border, and it's the Canadian customs that are doing the same thing. They're adding the tax to them, and those dollars are going to Ottawa. And if they continue ordering the product, it's going to be about another $400,000 that goes to Ottawa. So yeah, tariffs are terrible. They hit you coming and going. They're terrible for companies like I just described, but anytime you hear of an American tariff, it is the American government receiving those money. When you hear of a Canadian counter tariff being applied, it's Ottawa receiving those dollars.
Which is why we should all be against the tariffs, even counter tariffs, because all it does is line Ottawa's pocket while you get poor. While you pay more for everything, the government gets richer. Of course, they're real excited. So, we're going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax. Yeah, of course, the money is going to be made up in tariffs now.
And just proves that they could have done that all along, and they waited until they're in an election to go ahead and do that.
Yep. And we're fighting the Americans. How? By making me poorer? Like by making my Wendy's burger cost more money? Thank you for really taking it to the Americans while I have to pay $6 for my junior bacon cheeseburger.
Well, everyone's Team Canada, so I guess we're just going to have to take one for the team, aren't we?
Right. It's my civic duty to become more poor to help fight the Liberals' battle against Donald Trump so that Mark Carney can get elected. We've got I put this in the chat so that it could go on the stream today because this really got me last week because Mark Carney said, we have to give CBC more money, you guys. We need to give them more money because those hillbillies out there in rural Canada, they rely on the CBC for their news and to stay connected to the world. I don't know the last time I watched CBC except for research purposes about how are the Liberals wasting my money today. Oh, on those 4 boiled potatoes they call the At Issue panel? I guess so. But I don't rely on CBC for anything, and I could not be more rural. I literally do not have a landline for a phone into my house. It doesn't go past here. I live in a cabin on a hill surrounded by woods in the middle of a hayfield. But Mark Carney says that I need to give the CBC more money so that I can get the news, because us hillbillies don't have access to the internet or Starlink right now. Carla Joy Treadway, she's a podcaster on like economics issues, but she lives rurally too. She made this fun little TikTok about she's asking rural Canadians as a ruraler herself if we rely on the CBC. So this was kind of funny.
Hey, rural Canada here. This is not accurate. This is misinformation. I would ask my dog about the world situation before I turned on CBC. I would sooner trust the information that I got from a mushroom trip than I would this crap. I would trust Jeffrey Epstein's babysitting service before I would trust the CBC. I would rather rely on reading tea leaves and smoke signals before I would trust government-funded propaganda. Why would rural people need you? You see, rural people know how the world works. They make their own roads, plow their own roads, grow their own food, hunt for it. They know where energy comes from. They don't need some Laurentian elites in Ottawa clutching their pearls, telling them what they should be afraid of that day, telling them what they should virtue signal that day. You see, rural Canada lives in the real world. For that reason, and all the lies that you guys are constantly telling and the biased propaganda, we don't rely on you. That's not true.
Yeah,
It's
I
like-
could not agree with the sentiment more.
It's like they've never actually spoken to a rural person, so they think we're just gathered around our TV that still has antennas and we listen to the old radio shows on our AM radio after dark. Like, rural Canada is connected. We have Starlink, we have GPS in our tractors. We're not dumb hillbillies that need to have the world explained to us by the likes of Rosie Barton. We are self-sustaining, efficient people who grow your food and bring you your energy. We're not stupid, and we don't need to be talked down to. And it's just so, I don't want to say offensive, because offensive means that you can't control your emotions, but it is ridiculous to hear them say that we need the CBC because we're just a bunch of dumb hillbillies out here who talk to each other on telephones made of 2 cans and some string. Like, give me a break.
It shows just how completely out of touch the Laurentian elite, as she puts it, are when they think that people rely on the CBC as a credible source of information. I mean, so often we're out in the street talking to people, and they no longer watch the mainstream media, and they increasingly say that the people brought on to the mainstream media do not represent their interests or their views. And so the CBC obviously isn't heeding that warning. They're not trying to diversify their panels. I mean, they're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, until it's, your old stock Canadian who says, wait a minute, none of this makes sense. And why am I not hearing anyone who represents my perspective on the state broadcaster that I have no choice in funding? And so you're seeing more, like, that's just a growing sentiment among Canadians in general. And so you're seeing that more and more. And then you have these old white liberals who are saying, no, we love the state broadcaster and we rely on them to tell us exactly what we should care about and how to think about it. And so we must give it more of our money because we're riding off into the sunset with our union pensions. So why not just shell it out to the CBC?
Right. And let's cut through all the other stuff. There's a reason the Liberals want to give the CBC more money and focus it on rural Canada. Guess how rural Canada votes? We vote Conservative precisely for the reasons listed in that video, because we are self-reliant. The government is not our savior. We can do things ourselves. We're also very in tune with nature. In fact, a lot of our jobs rely on nature. So we're less likely to believe the scaremongering tactics about climate change from the people who never get their Birkenstocks off the pavement. So they have to focus all their money onto rural Canada because that's the only way to try to get our vote, which you're never going to get anyway. That's why it's a big blue ocean from Winnipeg to the interior of British Columbia. That's where all the rural people live, and we are not buying the Liberal garbage. So, sorry, leave us alone.
All right. We have some super chats piling up here. We have Moonglow gives $5. Thank you very much. Any comment on McGill? Sky News did a report. Not good. Thank you to you both. Great work. Yeah.
Alexa's working on something. I don't want to scare her, but she actually did take a bit of a week off work, although when she was away, she still did a report, which I was like, what are you doing? Please just enjoy your holiday. But isn't that always the way? This is why I never take time off work, because the lefties will pop off and do something while you're away from your computer. And that's exactly what happened in Montreal with McGill, but Alexa's working on it. Don't worry.
Yeah. We have one from Jacinta, $13.99. Thank you very much. Please put the address up for Pierre's rally tonight. I think he's posting all of the, at least he was last week, all of the addresses on his website.
Yes, I will. It is the address. Okay, first of all, if I'll tell you, of course I'm going to the rally tonight in Edmonton. It's not in Edmonton though anymore. It was moved outside of the city to Nisku. So that's in between Leduc and Edmonton. Why? Because the venue, which was big already, wasn't big enough for the number of people who have RSVP'd. So if you are going, I think the event is at 7:00 tonight. As David Aiken fretted about on Global News the other day, you should go very, very early. Not only is traffic going to be a snarl for sure, but I think this is probably going to be the biggest Poilievre rally. So tonight it's at 41 Business Park, 3815 8th Street, Nisku, Alberta. So that Nisku, for those of you who don't know, is the major industrial park that sits in between Edmonton and Leduc. It's where a lot of oil field service yards are, trucking yards. So I think that's a warehouse there that should be able to accommodate, although I think it's going to be overflow. I think this will be the biggest one yet, unless Calgary shows us up at some point later down the campaign trail. But it's going to be enormous. Watch my X account. It's my name, Sheila Gunn Reid. We'll be posting clips as we go. So I know that some of the team is coming up from Calgary and Lise is coming in from Regina. So we're going to be there early, doing our best to tell the truth about the size of the event, by the way, because the Liberals, of course, will lie.
Each one just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. The one in Kingston, I thought would have been bigger than the one in Oshawa last week, but then the weather was horrible for Kingston. There was still, I think, 4,000 to 5,000 turned out in Kingston, and then 6,000. Some numbers are putting it at 6,500 turnout in Oshawa, and it was literally like trying to get downtown Toronto for a concert. Just driving in there, the roads were lined up. The lineup to get in was massive. I walked for a minute and I made it halfway, and then that was an hour before doors opened. So the line was twice as long by the time it was, the doors were actually opening. So you would have had to walk for at least 10 minutes, I would say, to get from one end of the line to the other. Whatever that is in kilometers, I don't know, but it was massive.
Well,
and so we'll see tonight.
Tonight's going to be off the hook, I think. It's just, and these warehouses are not made to, they're made to hold things, not people. So I'm sure it's going to be uncomfortably muggy and warm in there. I think today is a balmy 8 or 9 degrees here in Alberta, which is like unseasonably warm for this time of year. So it's going to be busy. I think even in Penticton, they had like 4,000 people show up, which is like over 10% of the town. So I don't know.
Yeah, they've been massive.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Then we also have Alex Greer gives $2.79 with a thumbs up. Thanks very much, Alex. And we have Tanya Bananas. The name's cut off a little bit here for me. Gives $6.99. Tagging someone else in the chat, it looks like. Laugh out loud, that's hilarious. Now I have a picture of Jagmeet with a Jughead hat on. So hopefully all of you tuning in to the stream can see. There must be a visual in there somewhere. Maybe we can pull it up and show it of Jagmeet with a Jughead hat on. There's
Yeah.
really hilarious memes, however you pronounce it, going out. And there has been for the last few years, ever since his coalition with the Liberals. There's some funny romance depictions of Jagmeet and Trudeau, and funny stuff you can find online.
The dawn of AI has really done a lot for
Yes.
the memes on the internet.
Yes.
I just want to report on something from the desk of the office of the president of the Independent Press Gallery of Canada, which is me. And the Independent Press Gallery, we issued a statement today condemning the Liberal Party's repeated exclusion of independent journalists Karima Saad and David Menzies from the April 4th campaign event in Scarborough. I wrote today, this exclusion is a troubling pattern by the Liberal Party to control media coverage by selectively granting access to journalists. No independent journalists have been allowed into Carney's campaign event since the federal writ was dropped on March 23rd. Alternatively, the Liberal campaign has promised an additional $150 million top-up to CBC's $1.3 billion in annual funding to go along with its preferential access to Liberal politicians. The IPG asserts that the ability to question and scrutinize elected officials and political hopefuls is not optional in a democracy, it's essential. The Liberal Party's actions undermine the principles of a free and independent press, which are fundamental to Canada's democratic values. And then I said, the Canadian public has the right to hear from all voices in the media, not just those that echo Liberal talking points and take government money. So,
which flies in the face of Carney, what was it, last year, the year before?
Yeah.
At the World Economic Forum, when he was questioned on the street by Ezra and Avi, that he stands for press freedom. And he denounced David Menzies being arrested at that Chrystia Freeland event. So,
and then he calls the cops on journalists when he's in charge. You know what? It reminds me of Jason Kenney. He was Mr. I stand for religious freedom. Like, one of the key platforms of the Stephen Harper government was their foreign policy also had a strong condemnation of religious persecution abroad. Jason Kenney strongly denounced the genocide happening against Christians in the Middle East. He strongly denounced the CCP's rewriting of the Christian Bible and their treatment of religious minorities, to the point where I don't think Jason Kenney could actually go to China at this point. He was so strong in his condemnation. And then when he was in charge, he arrested pastors. And so it's real easy to put your money or put your mouth out there. But when it comes time to put your money where your mouth is, that's the true test of a man. Jason Kenney failed, and so has Mark Carney.
Mm-hmm. And to play up another idiom, he can talk the talk, but he obviously cannot walk the walk.
Definitely.
All right. Do you want, I'll read this
Sure.
1775 coffee script, and then we'll go to an ad break and come back to talk about some of that CCP foreign interference.
Oh, it's crazy
pesky stuff we have going on here in Canada. Just, casually, unabated, unfettered foreign interference. Nothing to see here. Okay. So these little ad reads help us to keep our streams flowing and keep the lights on. So we appreciate your patience as we read through the 1775 coffee script, because weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity, just like 1775 coffee. It's a single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out BS when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend is real energy and lasting focus. No synthetic garbage. For K-Cup pods, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and $30,000 in cash. There you go. All right, quick ad break, and then we'll come back for more.
What if governments are trying to reinvent the wheel when the greatest teacher of all times has already laid out the perfect blueprint for a constitution for a kingdom of love, faith, and freedom? Introducing the Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport. This special edition Freedom Passport captures the foundational truths of love, ethics, and freedom for all. It's a powerful reminder of Jesus' call to love one another and to be part of something bigger that you can carry with you every day. Join the movement, share the truth, and spread the love with your family and friends. Get your Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport at freedompassport.ca. And right now, all orders in North America come with free shipping and a free downloadable song with every purchase.
Why should you join Canada's National Firearms Association? We currently have one of the most aggressively anti-firearm governments in our nation's history, promoting fear and placing blame like never before. Our rights, freedoms, culture, and heritage, it's all on the line. But we are fighting back, and there is strength in numbers. We work within the law to change the law, to defend competitors, hunters, collectors, and other law-abiding firearms owners. We can get through this. We've done it before, and we'll do it again, if you are with us. Canada's National Firearms Association. Freedom, safety, responsibility.
I just have some news on the Poilievre rally south of Edmonton tonight. Stephen Harper is introducing Poilievre at the Edmonton rally. So the last time I was at a huge conservative rally in the Edmonton area was Stephen Harper, and I think it was like at a airplane hangar, I want to say, and it was people were out the door around the block. It was crazy. Even people are like, this is the conservative heartland. So if you want big numbers, this is where you come. However, these people are, I mean, it's to see big numbers in Oshawa is actually more impressive to me than to see big numbers in Edmonton, right? To see huge numbers in Penticton. That is interesting to me. To see big numbers from the surrounding areas to the socialist hellscape of Edmonton, it's not all that compelling. I mean, it'll make for interesting footage and it's going to be awesome, but to see those numbers come out in the rest of the country actually interests me.
Well, and that's what I was saying when Kingston is an exponentially larger city than Oshawa. And I'm trying to factor in the weather, which was horrible freezing rain conditions. But to see more people turn out in Oshawa than they did in Kingston was really shocking to me. And I got there just over an hour early. So I was there just before 5 p.m. Doors opened at 6 p.m. And I was one of the last people to be able to actually get right into the main parking lot. Everyone else, shortly after me, had to go into, all the peripheral parking spaces and way down the road. People walked kilometers to get in. And I think the rally started about 45 minutes late just because they couldn't get everybody in on time to open for 6 p.m. It was massive. And people, of course, got turned away as well. Like there was just not a way to fit everybody in.
Okay.
All
Let's
righty.
get into
So
the
heading.
CCP stuff.
Yes. We have a video here, a clip to share of foreign interference targeting, guess who? Mark Carney, a CCP, a Chinese Communist Party linked WeChat account, ran a foreign influence campaign supporting Carney and this 2025 election, reaching up to 3 million views. It aimed to sway Chinese Canadian voters with coordinated
towards Carney, we should note, because a lot of the attacks were leveled at Chrystia Freeland. And they sort of dance around that, but when you look like into the details of what they are trying to do, this is the same account or same linked organization that went after Michael Chong. They're not going after Carney. They're signal boosting Carney, and they went after Freeland.
And they're doing it with coordinated, inauthentic content. And Ottawa was briefed about this just yesterday, April the 6th. But where's all the misinformation mongers, right? If they're boosting inauthentic content, it's the Liberals who have all this legislation out about curbing misinformation and criminalizing it. And so here we have that happening to our elections, and the Liberals are just sitting back, just quiet and mum on all of it. So we'll play this clip.
We are aware of an information operation targeting the 45th general election on the social media platform WeChat. The information operation was launched by Yoli Yomien, WeChat's most popular news account. Intelligence reporting links the Yoli Yomien account to the PRC, Chinese Communist Party's Central Political and Legal Affairs Commission. The content of this information operation contains story about the Prime Minister, Liberal Party of Canada leader, and candidate in Nepean, Mark Carney. This content has been amplified in a coordinated and inauthentic way. This information operation had contrasting positive and negative narratives, first amplifying Mr. Carney's stance with the United States, and then targeting his experience and credentials. The site task force assesses that the foreign state-backed information operation was intended to influence Canadian Chinese communities and look to mold perceptions about the candidate. The campaign received high levels of user engagement and views, between 85,000 and 130,000 interactions, and an estimate of 1 to 3 million views. WeChat developer Tencent reports that the platform itself has over 1.3 billion monthly active users, but has not disclosed how many of those users live overseas. The activity saw large spikes of what is believed to be coordinated inauthentic behavior on March 10th and 25th, 2025. Following increasing levels of engagement on the platform, the Liberal Party representative was briefed about the findings on April 6th. The site task force will be discussing this issue with Tencent, the developer of WeChat, later today to raise our concerns.
So Carney's briefed on it, but you just don't hear that in the news.
Well, and I guess I have a couple of different questions here. Or maybe not questions. My one question is, why is WeChat still operating in Canada? We know that it was used to target conservatives and an NDPer named Jenny Kwan in the 2021 and 2019 election. So we know this has been used to compromise the last two elections. So why is it still here? Well, I can tell you why. I'll answer my own question. Because the Liberals prorogued Parliament, so none of the recommendations of the Foreign Interference Commission were implemented, meaning the entire Foreign Interference Commission was just all for show. We sort of knew that towards the end of it when they said, we're actually never going to tell you who the 11 parliamentarians are who are compromised by foreign interference. But even if it weren't for show, the Liberals made sure that it was for show by proroguing Parliament before they could make sure that foreign interference was at least mitigated before we went into the next election. And why do you think they did that? Well, I'm guessing it's because the foreign interference would, as it did in the last two elections, flow to their benefit. And it sounds like Carney is China's pick. And that makes sense given Carney's stance on Paul Chang and now the replacement for Paul Chang. Paul Chang's replacement is Peter Ewan. Ryan Gertsen has this photo, or I guess it's a video of Peter Ewan, who's also a former cop. Again, what is going on with the police service in Toronto?
Yeah.
Singing a ballad for the Chinese communists while in uniform. This is the replacement for the guy behind the kidnapping plot. This is just wild.
Mm-hmm.
this looks actually quite North Korean, with everybody in uniform singing a ballad for dear leader. Look at there's like it's very clear what this is all about. They're standing in front of like the Great Wall of China. This is no accident, right? So they, as Dean Skoreko, it's a conservative activist in BC, points out, Charney just replaced one Chinese spy cop with another Chinese government spy cop, and this uh, the underlying issue that needs to be sorted out after the election, I think, is what the F is going on in Toronto policing, that there are these spy cops that are installed there. Imagine being a member of the Chinese community there, like the Chinese dissident community there that left China because you want to be free. And if there's any sort of foreign interference in your community, of intimidation, threats, officials, maybe they're bullying you out of the consulate like they did to Michael Chong, and you go to the police and then you get Paul Chang or Peter Ewan as the cop on your file.
Yeah, and Toronto is the place that has, I don't know if they have the most, but there are at least 3 Chinese police stations
Right.
in and around the GTA. And so what is happening with Toronto police, these Chinese police stations? And there are, as we learn, the more and more that we learn, the more questions than answers we seem to have. But it's very clear from, Carney's Beijing banking bromances
Yep.
to this unfettered, unabated foreign interference, China's
These two candidate
influence.
selections, there's no accident that these two candidates were selected. And we have reports now from the site task force, which is largely useless. They're like, oh, we're going to be having discussions with WeChat. Okay, great. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
WeChat
we've
is
asked
still
them.
here. It's the tool of foreign interference. If you were serious about it, you would have got rid of WeChat in Canada. I mean, we can't get news on Facebook. Like you guys could do something about WeChat. But I mean, it's just also in our faces. They're not even trying to hide it right now, with this, this shuffling of spy cops, Chinese spy cops in and around one riding. I mean,
Musical
it's
chairs.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Chinese
musical
spy cop
spies.
musical chairs. Where's CSIS though? That's what I'd like to know in all of this. There was something I wanted to pull out a quote here from the backgrounder. The information operation targeting Mr. Carney is deliberately amplifying narratives in a coordinated and inauthentic way on WeChat to Chinese audiences, including communities living in Canada. The site task force observed large spikes of what is believed to be coordinated, inauthentic behavior on March 10th and 25th. So, I mean, it's taking them a whole month in the first instance to even bring this to the attention of Canadians during such a crucial time. Right? These aren't normal times that we're living. We're in the middle of a snap election with a prime minister who has never been elected by a constituency. He doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons. He has no political experience. He's coming from big banks that have very close, tight affiliations with the Chinese Communist Party, with Beijing banks, and all these tentacles in the spider web of affiliations with Chinese tycoons. And Sam Cooper has done amazing work on this file and drawing out those connections and shining a light on them. So this is just more craziness to add to the world that Canadians are currently living in. And as I see, liberal signs popping up everywhere, I'm like, do you guys really know what is happening within your party right now? And the thing I find really strange is how quiet people like Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland are on all of this. They're letting Mark Carney kind of just take the spotlight. I mean, he's the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, but their silence is really also maybe showing that the Liberals know this is happening and they're not speaking out about it.
Well, and who can speak out about it though, because he didn't take that gag, is Pierre Poilievre. Now the Liberals will hide behind, I got high-level briefing, so I can't talk about this, even though it's a huge issue in Canadian politics and in the election. Yeah, it's weird, though, that the Site Task Force says that Mark Carney, his messaging was being amplified around fighting the Americans, like his whatever the specific wording was. But if you read between the lines, it's like the whole elbows up narrative is being pushed by China. And I'm reliably informed by the likes of Ruby Dalla and Chandra Arya that if you are the recipient of foreign interference in an election campaign, at least relating to the Liberals, they'll boot you out on your ass. So Mark Carney is the beneficiary of foreign interference. China is meddling on his behalf to amplify his anti-American stance, which makes perfect sense because the China and America is those are the two big superpowers. Why is he still a candidate then? By his own metric, he's got to go.
Should we be expecting Mark Carney's resignation in the coming days? Well, hopefully you'll hear it first on our Daily News live stream. All right. With that, I think we've covered all of the major headliners that we had planned out. So let's just get to a couple of these super chats. We have here from LaMunch, gives $2.79. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rebel, for your accuracy, courage, and joy. Yes, we try to still have some fun and joke around in our lives, because otherwise you would just be crying in a corner.
Right. I try to be a happy warrior, but boy, it gets tough some days.
It does. That's why, it's great to get out into the field. And, even when we have like Rebel events, and even at the Poilievre event, it was so refreshing to just talk to Canadians who knew what was going on with the world, and they had knowledge of world events. And so the conversation just flows a lot easier because you're already on the same page about what's happening around you. So it definitely makes it a lot easier to have and engage with the public when you're both kind of on a level playing field. You're not out to lunch living in La La Land watching the CBC like it's your religion. Randy Albert gives $2 and says Spygate 2025. Yeah,
no kidding.
There's so many gates, and not to mention Bill Gates, but the foreign interference. I mean, we could go on and on, all the different Spygate, and we had
two Chinese cop spies in the same riding. Like, that's so ridiculous. They're just rubbing it in our faces.
Right, because Canadians are too busy watching the CBC. And the rural ones are saying, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make very much sense. And the ones who can actually touch grass, whereas in Toronto, when you're surrounded by the concrete jungle and you're relying on state propaganda to funnel your information to you, going, oh, there's nothing to see here. It's all just it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. No big deal.
Yep. All right. I think that's it.
All right.
Yeah, we'll save some of that other stuff for tomorrow. I think we'll have a guest on the show for about 10 minutes between Lise and I. Tamara, thanks for co-hosting with me today.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes at Rebel News to make sure it's there whenever you want to watch it. They work very hard to put the show together before we get onto the stream and then just talk. They do a lot of the legwork, most of the legwork, 99% of the legwork before we jump on and do all the talking and take all the credit. And thanks to everybody who donated, super chats, rumble rants to help us keep the lights on here at Rebel News. We couldn't do it without you. As you know, we'll never take a penny from Mark Carney's government to do the work that we do. And as my friend David Menzies always says, stay safe and stay sane.
Speaking of economic matters, we are all watching the stock market with interest today. We have to acknowledge that this chaos is the direct result of wrong-headed, unnecessary, chaotic policies coming from President Trump. These tariffs are a massive distraction, and they remind us why it was such a mistake for the Liberals to make us so dependent on the Americans over the lost Liberal decade.